Hi everybody, welcome again to Dr. Manny's YouTube Learnshops. This is part 2 to do with data analysis in qualitative research. How to annoy a qualitative researcher? Because qualitative research isn't quantitative. It isn't objective. It's subjective. And we'll be alluding to that as we go through this lecture presentation. What are your learning objectives for this session? Well, we're just going to review selected qualitative data and how it's analysed. And these will be thematic analysis, content analysis, narrative analysis, and looking at interpretive phenomenology analysis with computer-assisted qualitative data analysis. Let's begin with thematic analysis. So what then is thematic analysis? First of all, it's the most common form of analysis in all qualitative research methodologies. It uses the process of coding, which is not unique to thematic analysis. It occurs in other methods. It's a process by which codes, categories and themes, which are essentially ideas which reoccur, and evolve into patterns. These are all derived from qualitative data. It emphasizes identifying, examining, and recording themes, not unique to thematic analysis. Generic in a lot of the different types of qualitative research methodologies. It's important, however, to describe phenomenon and to answer the research question. Again, not unique to qualitative research methods. What are some of the types of thematic analysis? Look, there are numerous. The two important ones that seem to reoccur are inductive and deductive. However, you do have semantic, latent, critical realist or essentialist, and constructionist. With inductive, coding and theme development is directed by the content of the data. With deductive, coding and theme development is directed by existing concepts or ideas. There's a framework. Someone's created or used a previous framework. Semantic reflects explicit content of the data. Latent reports concepts and assumptions underpinning the data. Critical realist or essentialist focuses on reporting an assumed reality which is evident in the data, and constructionist focuses on looking at how certain realities are constructed or created by the data. If you want more information, let me know. Otherwise, go to the internet, research it yourself. You are master's students. What are some of the phases that occur during thematic analysis? Well, the phases, there are 6. Familiarization with the data, generating the initial codes, searching for themes and then reviewing those themes, refining them, defining and naming the themes, labeling, and producing the final report. Let's look at phase 1. Phase 1 is familiarization with the data. Before you embark on any form of analysis, you should be familiar with what you're doing. So this means reading and rereading material until you're familiar with it and happy and content. Becoming familiar with the material, understanding it, and then transcribing the data, which is important. The process also involves note-taking, memoing, which is crucial in this initial phase. And this is where you get your initial ideas from the raw data. And this step creates potential codes. Then you've got generating the initial codes. And this is where you create an initial list of items with reoccurring patterns. This is systematic. You use a system to organise data relevant to each code and the research question. It always relates to the research question. That's why you're doing the analysis. It's an inductive, iterative, which means cyclic, approach to analysis. And this is where you as the researcher, the analyst, refine, add, subtract, combine, split your codes. It's an ongoing process. So at the end of each phase, and I'm not going to repeat this for each section here, I'm just going to repeat it once, or maybe at the end as well. But at the end of each phase, self-generated researcher reflexive questions are asked. And these are only my examples. What does the theme mean in relation to the research question? What is the assumption underpinning the theme? What are the implications of the theme? Why was this theme revealed? Why are the participants mentioning it? And what is the overall story that other themes reveal about the topic of inquiry? This is the process for reflexive thinking. You're reflecting what's happening in relation to your research question. Then you've got phase 3. Phase 3 is searching for themes. And this is where collecting the data relevant to each potential theme, then organising the codes into potential themes. The theme consists of ideas that describe, explain events or statements from stories that you're being told. Qualitative research is about storytelling. If you're not a good storyteller, maybe qualitative research isn't for you. Themes describe an outcome of an analytic reflection. That's you, your analysis. The themes identify what the data means to you as the researcher. Phase 4, you go back, you review the themes. And there should be, at this stage, a set of potential themes that support or contraindicate or contradict the research question. You check the themes against the coded extracts and the entire data set that you've got already. And this generates a thematic map which allows you to refine, again, add, subtract, combine and split codes. And it alerts you as the researcher to new patterns and issues in the data. Some methodologies call this diagramming, where you create a diagram to illustrate the themes that you have, which potentially could be categories or subcategories. Then you've got phase 5. And this is where you define or name, labeling the themes. And this requires you as the researcher and the analyst to search for data that supports or refutes your research question. It promotes further development of the themes, and the list of potential themes that you've got are rephrased, refined, condensed into smaller units, because let me tell you, you're going to have a lot of themes, hundreds possibly, that you need to refine into smaller themes, subcategories, categories. And after finalization of these themes, you name them and you define them, what they are. When it comes to phase 6, this is producing the final report. And this begins the process of writing the final report. While writing, you as the researcher can still decide on further themes and categories that may reflect or relate to the research question. And it's the final opportunity for you as the analyst for any further analysis. And this is where selection of compelling transcript examples that relate to the research question and the literature review are provided. And the final is an academic analytic report. So in summary, this method allows you transcription, where the data must be detailed, and you've got transcript accuracy. You have coding. Each item must be considered as a potential code. Themes are generated by a thorough, comprehensive process. All relevant theme transcripts have to be codified. Themes have been checked to the initial data and then compared to each other. The themes now are clear, consistent, and distinctive. During the analysis, data has been interpreted and analysed by you, not just described. The data analysis matches and transcripts illustrate your analytic claims. It provides a clear, convincing story about the topic and the data. And there's a balance between analytic narrative and the transcripts that you've got. In the final report, you as the researcher are active in the process. The themes do not just emerge. You create the themes. Sometimes they're quite abstract. The language and the concepts are consistent with the epistemology, your epistemology, as to why you've chosen this methodology. And your ontology could be included at this point as well. The assumptions about thematic analysis are clearly explained. Now let's move on to content analysis. What is content analysis? Well, content analysis is another research technique. It utilises a systematic evaluation and summarises written, spoken, visual communication in a quantitative approach. It's applied to determine the presence of certain words, themes, or concepts with qualitative data, such as the written text, such as books, chapters in books, essays, the spoken, interviews, discussions, the written, newspaper articles or headlines, historical documents, and speeches. Essentially, content analysis involves any communication event, and it's then that it's converted qualitative research or data into qualitative data. It's an important bridge between purely quantitative and purely qualitative research methods. And if it's something that you're interested in, you'll have to investigate it further. What are some of the types of content analysis? Well, in general, there are two: conceptual analysis and relation analysis. Conceptual analysis basically determines the existence and frequency of concepts, ideas, beliefs in a text, whether it's oral or written. Relation analysis develops the conceptual analysis further by examining the relationships among these concepts, ideas, beliefs, perceptions in the text. So what's the process? Well, generically anyway. What's the generic process for content analysis. 1. You identify data sources, not unique to other methods. You develop categories, again, not unique. You code data, again, not unique. You assess reliability, and then you analyze the results. And during the whole process, documentation occurs ongoingly. Step 1 is to identify data sources. First of all, you identify the appropriate data sources based on what the research question is. You consider the source and format the information, as well as consider validity and reliability, which again is quantitative. You decide upon the unit of analysis, that is, the items to be coded, from where the source data came from. You decide on the selection of the items to be analysed, and then continue to step 2. Step 2 is where you develop categories. And this is where the researcher or the analyst develops useful, valid categories based on the research question. You test a few items, either independently or as a group, to identify items that may be ambiguous or still need further refinement for clarification. Coding of the items requires 2 independent analysts, because again, this is related to reliability and validity, which is quantitative. And then a calculation is made about the preliminary inter-rater reliability, which means your 2 independent analysts. You refine categories, you define specifications about what should be included as well as what should not be included. And when there's any uncertainty, you have to ensure reliability of the coding. Step 3 involves coding of the data. And this is where the team or you establish a decision rule as to whether items should be coded to one category or whether they can be coded to multiple categories based on the preliminary review and the testing of the coding. This is where a decision is made to how many analysts will code the data to establish reliability of the data. If 2 independent analysts code the same data, or if it's a less rigorous approach, quantitative approach, the method will be performed only by 1 analyst who will code the data. Or again, a decision has to be made whether another analyst will verify whether the codes are correct or accurate. Deals with reliability. It deals with validity. Then the data is coded. Step 4. You assess reliability, as mentioned previously. Again, when coding is completed, another researcher or analyst has to look at it. Inter-rater reliability. And for items in which there was a disagreement from the analysts, there should be a final meeting to discuss whether to keep or dispose the coding item. For instances in which an agreement cannot be reached, a third person, another analyst, should review and arbitrate. And these all relate to quantitative methodologies. Blind review. objective review. Researcher is neutral. Step 5. Analyze results. And this is based on a coding scheme to review items by category, which is the number of items in it, the percentage of items coded in this category, the themes that emerged. This is where a decision is made if the categories should be rolled up, narrowed, or made broader. Lots of discussions occur about the categories, especially those that are of special interest. What are the disadvantages? Well, it only describes what there is in the observed pattern, not why it's occurred. It's very time consuming. It assumes that all things can be measured, which is quantitative. It requires tests of reliability and validity, quantitative. Selected items may not be representative, quantitative. Biases may occur when creating the items, reflecting quantitative concerns. It seldom accounts for subjective emotional dimensions, which are qualitative. And the final disadvantage is that there are no right or wrong categories, which again is coming from a quantitative perspective. So in summary, the goal for using content analysis is, or are, to reduce large amounts of unstructured content, to describe characteristics of the content, to identify important aspects of the content, to present important aspects of content transparently, to focus on groups or individuals, to examine trends and relationships in the text or the sources, to determine behaviour, to support an argument by understanding the content characteristics. Now let's review narrative analysis, which is more specific to qualitative. And it's about storytelling. So, what is narrative analysis or narrative research? Well, this is a qualitative approach with a specific focus on storytelling. The researchers use narrative analysis to understand how participants construct a story from their own personal experiences. First, the research participants interpret their own lives through narrative or storytelling. And second, the researcher interprets the construction of the narrative. It explores what the story means and any potential lessons that could be learned from the story, or the analysis of the narrative research. What are some of the sources that narratives can focus on? Well, they can be journals, letters, conversations, autobiographies or biographies, transcripts of in-depth interviews, an individual person, personal narratives. What are some of the examples of personal narratives? Well, they can be topical stories, personal narratives, entire life stories. So with topical stories, this is a restricted story about one specific moment in time with a plot, characters, background or setting, and it doesn't encompass the entirety of the person's life. For example, a research participant's answer to a single interview question. When it comes to personal narrative, they can come from a long interview or a series of long interviews that give an extended account of someone's life. For example, the researcher could be conducting an in-depth interview or series of in-depth interviews with an individual over a period of extended time. Weeks, months, even years. Or it can be an entire life story, which is constructed from a collection of interviews, observations, or documents about a person's life. An example could be a historian putting together a biography of someone's life from past artifacts. What are some of the key characteristics? Well, key characteristics involve individual experiences, chronology of those experiences, collecting individual stories, restoring or retelling the story, coding for themes, context or setting, background, collaborating with the participants. So when we look at the steps involved in narrative research, they essentially are to identify the phenomenon, to purposely select an individual who you can learn about the phenomenon from, purpose of sampling, collect the story from that individual, retell the story to the individual that you've just listened to, collaborate with the participant, the storyteller, the narrator, write a story about the participant's experiences, and then validate the accuracy of the report. So, again in review, step 1, identify the phenomenon that you're interested in exploring. You purposively select an individual that you want to learn about the phenomenon from. You collect the stories from that individual and you reflect about the whole process, and in doing so you have them tell your story, and you can collect other field texts as well that could validate that story. In step 4, you restory, which is essentially retelling the individual story, and this can be related to past, present and future. It can be related to the setting or the background, and it essentially describes their story, and in doing so you analyse their story for themes. Step 5, you collaborate with the participant, the narrator, the storyteller during all phases of this research. And then in step 6, you write the story about the participant's personal, social experiences. And in step 7, you validate the accuracy of the report with the participant. So let's look at it again. In step 1, you identify a problem or a phenomenon that you want to explore. And this involves identifying an issue or concern that provides the purpose for the study, and it enables you as the researcher to understand personal or social experiences of an individual. Step 2. You select one or more participants to study because they know about the phenomenon and you know that they know about the phenomenon. This is purposive sampling. The sample is purposely chosen. Many narrative studies examine only one individual, but several individuals can be studied as well. You select an individual or individuals who can provide an understanding of the issue. And you carefully select this person or persons based on their experiences. Step 3. You collect the story from the participant. Besides the participant verbally sharing their story, through conversations or interviews, field text also provide information about the participant. Examples could be journal, diary entries, letters sent by the individual, photographs, memory boxes where they've stored information about their past or their family's past, and stories acquired through friends or family members. Step 4. This is where you re-story or retell the individual story. And in this step it involves examining raw data, identifying key elements, organising, sequencing these items or elements, and then retelling a story that describes the individual's experiences. In this process of restoring, it helps the reader to understand the story by sequencing that's in a logical, systematic order. The stories commonly include the following elements: the setting or background, the characters, those participants involved, the problems, the actions taken, and what was resolved, the resolution. Step 5 involves collaboration with the participants or storyteller, and throughout the narrative story, the collection process, the researcher works with the storyteller to ensure the participants' experiences, what they're telling you, are accurately portrayed, identified, analysed, written. In step 6, this is where you, as the researcher and analyst, write a story about the participants' experiences. And usually this is the biggest step in narrative research. The participants' life experiences are written into a story by the researcher. And it highlights specific themes that emerged throughout the story and involved a section about the importance of the narrative research, which can be helpful to other readers or those that are going through similar experiences. Step 7 is where you validate the report's accuracy. And an accurate report, as with most research, is essential. But in this case, it's essential to preserve the story. And this is where conferring with individuals and searching for disconfirming evidence will protect the story's credibility. What are the strengths of narrative analysis or research? It's an unobtrusive process. The researcher and participant become very, very close. It can provide a holistic picture. It's very useful to provide in-depth data, and it allows phenomena to be understood. It's a collaborative process. It provides a voice. It helps to understand topics, and it could be the basis for data triangulation, which affects rigor or trustworthiness of the data. It encourages ingenuity, uniqueness, and it opens interpretation, which allows revisitation. Other researchers can go back and revisit the topic, and they may end up with different data. What are some of the weaknesses? Well, it's not considered suitable for large numbers of participants because it is time consuming, as most qualitative processes are. It may be difficult to identify the author, and in doing so, ownership of the story. And there could be fake data from the narrator. It doesn't have a proper set of guidelines to follow, and findings, quantitatively, cannot be generalised. Researcher personal bias may influence finding, again, quantitative terminology, and subjectivity may emerge, which is qualitative. And there could be ethical considerations when it comes to the story. So in summary, narrative research and analysis focuses on studying most of the time an individual person, gathering data through a collection of stories, reporting the individual's experiences, and discussing the meaning of those experiences for that individual. Okay, let's now move on to the final two. Interpretive Phenomenological Analysis, IPA. Not unlike phenomenology, which you've already reviewed. However, with minor variations. I'll just go back into some of the background. Remember, phenomenology is an approach that was created by Edmund Husserl in 1887, and it was later refined by Martin Heidegger in 1920. And it seeks to study the lived human experiences and the way things are perceived and appear to the conscious. When we look at phenomenology, it's hermeneutic phenomenology that focuses on the subjective experience of people to reveal the world as experienced through their life world stories. Hermeneutics basically is the art and science of interpretation of meaning. IPA, however, explores, describes, interprets, and has got a theoretical underpinning that is still involved with phenomenology and hermeneutics. It's just a variation. These are questions from topics that are complex, ambiguous, and emotionally laden. So, in IPA analysis, basically what happens is it balances phenomenological description with insightful interpretation of participants' accounts. It maintains an ideographic focus, which basically means that its aims is to offer insights into how a given person in a given context makes sense of a given phenomenon. And for us, it offers a degree of transparency, contextual detail about the sample, a clear account of the process, adequate commentary on the data, key points which are illustrated by verbatim transcript participant quotes. So in summary, IPA as a qualitative research method offers a flexible and versatile approach to understanding people's experiences and provides interesting and detailed insights into the subjective lived experiences of people. A slight step higher than phenomenology as a research design. Consequently, researchers who are planning to adopt IPA are advised to take active steps to give voice to the experiences of the participants, followed by significant, detailed interpretation of their narratives. Though remember, it's important to bear in mind that IPA is fundamentally a subjective research approach, so two analysts working on the same data may come up with different interpretations. It's subjective, as most qualitative research is. So let's conclude with computer-assisted qualitative data analysis. And basically, the computer's doing most of the work. And after reviewing it, I've learned something about it because I'm not really into computer-assisted qualitative data analysis, but you might be. So, what is CAQDAS? Well, computer-assisted qualitative data analysis is a term that refers to category of computer programs that have been specifically developed to help you as a researcher in completing a range of tasks associated with analysis and interpretation of a lot of qualitative data. Well, choosing software. It is possible to conduct qualitative data without a computer, and that's my philosophy. What are the concerns? That as a researcher, you rely too much on computers, shortcuts, that'll impede the process of distancing the researcher from the text or the data. The advantage, however, it does ease the burden of cutting and pasting by hand, which I'm into manually, and produce more powerful analysis by creation and insertion of codes in the text files, indexing, construction of hyperlinks, and selective retrieval of text segments, which from my perspective you can still do manually. What are the benefits? Well, the benefits are, with qualitative software, your workflow will be similar. Each step is made easier by the computer's capability for data storage and automated searching and display, depending on the program that you've chosen. You can use text, picture, audio and video source files directly. You can assign codes manually by auto-coding into any section of the text, audio or video or picture. Analysis is essentially easier with the report feature, where you can select a subset of cases or codes to work with. You can choose what data to use, and you can sort your reports automatically. What are the advantages? Well, it's easier to transcribe data, writing and editing the data, storing the data, coding the data, searching and retrieving data, data linking of related texts, writing and editing memos about the data. Depends on the program that you've chosen. You display selected reduced data, you can map graphically, you can prepare reports. What are some of the key questions that academics suggest that you use when choosing software? Key questions could be the type and amount of data that you're going to handle, the theoretical approach to analysis, the time to learn versus the time to analyse, because you have to learn about the programs. The level of analysis, is it simple or detailed? How close are you allowed to get to the data? Or how close do you want to be to the data? Any desired quantification of results? Individual, you, or working as a team? Peer software support is available, or is it available? And how much does it cost? Economics. So, common sources could be Atlas, Hyper Research, MaxQDA, Ethnograph, QSR N6, QSR N-Nevo, WEFT, QDA, OpenCode, and there are many, many, many more. I'm not familiar with any of them. I preferred to do it manually. So in conclusion, there's no best data analysis technique. Each technique has got its advantages and its disadvantages. What's important is the suitability and the appropriateness depends on you, the purpose of your research, the scope of your research, and the resources available for that research. Okay, thanks everybody. As previously, if you found this session worthwhile, check out some of the other Dr. Manny Learnshops on YouTube. Okay, bye for now.